event so successful. Your support is vital to RAND, not only your participation, but your philanthropic contributions that enable RAND to do some of its boldest and most innovative research. Thank you in particular to our event sponsors, and a warm welcome to our newest donors, the group we call RAND Next. It's a network of young professionals who share the passion that we have at RAND for tackling hard problems with evidence. Now, our media partner again this year, we're very fortunate, is Thomson Reuters. They're recording tonight's program, and we'll have excerpts on our website soon. And my final thanks go to RAND trustee Michael Linton, the CEO of Sony Entertainment. Michael's made it possible for us to begin the program here at Sony yet again, so we're very grateful. Now, in 1988, one of our trustees, the late James Q. Wilson, called RAND a national asset. And at the time, we were indeed primarily an American institution. But today, the nearly 2,000 people of RAND come from 50 different nations and work in over 100 countries every year. We're tackling really a dazzling array of challenges that face decision makers in every sector around the globe. But what the people of RAND have in common, no matter where they're working and no matter what they're working on, is a commitment to the proposition that the best policy, the best attacks on the hardest problems are the ones that are based on facts and rigorous analysis, not ideology and not spin. And I'm proud to say that people like you who support RAND share that commitment. Now, we're launching this year's Politics Aside with a topic that brings us back to the very beginnings of the RAND Corporation. The first technical report produced by the researchers of RAND analyzed the feasibility and the utility of what was called a world-circling spaceship. It garnered little attention at the time. This was 1946. But one of its contributors said something that turned out to be prophetic. He said, to visualize the impact on the world, one can imagine the consternation and admiration that would be felt here if the United States were to discover suddenly that some other nation had already put up a successful satellite. And of course, 11 years after he made that statement, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, and we are all familiar with the profound impact that it had. Now today, nearly 70 years after that report and after that statement, people around the world rely on space for nearly everything in our lives, navigation, weather forecasting, communications, security, science. And RAND continues to analyze space exploration from many different perspectives, what policies will drive innovation, what policies will keep our satellites functioning, protect our sensitive information, make us here on Earth more secure and more safe. Tonight's moderator, Matt Miller. He is a columnist for the Washington Post, host of the popular public radio program Left, Right, and Center, host of a terrific new podcast series, This is Interesting. But he's even more than that, author of 2 books, erstwhile congressional candidate, winner of the Los Angeles Times endorsement for that office, great consumer of RAND research and analysis, my friend Matt Miller.
Thank you, Michael. And it sounds like the microphone is working, so greetings, good evening, and I'm honored to be at RAND tonight. You know, if all the terrific analysis and inspiring work, not just in space, but in all the myriad fields of human endeavor, where RAND has had an impact, if that weren't enough to impress you with RAND's legacy and contribution to the world, I've always thought the original proof of RAND's genius was that they put a think tank on the beach. That was a great idea. And to show that you could do it. I mean, you know, the kind of snobbery, shall we say, sometimes you get out of Washington, that you couldn't be thinking these things, you know, outside of Washington. RAND is living proof that that's not the case, and that huge impact, even greater impact, comes from outside. And I know that under my friend Michael's leadership, it's only RAND's impact and its insight is reaching even greater heights. So, so congratulations to RAND, and it's great to be here. Now, Mark Twain said, you may know, that the ideal audience was informed, inquisitive, intelligent, and drunk. And when I observed the open bar, at least, as we went around the robotics outside, it may be that that last part is partly true, at least. And so if that's true, you hopefully won't notice that I know virtually nothing about space, which makes me, I hope, a good interlocutor on your behalf as we, you know, as we approach a topic that I still look at with the kind of starry-eyed wonder I had as a fan of the original Star Trek series. So I'm excited about that. It's very exciting to be here talking about space exploration a day after space history was made. Yesterday, as you know, the European Space Agency successfully landed a probe on the surface of a comet 300 million miles from Earth. You know, at a moment when the Secret Service can't seem to lock the front door of the White House, it's very nice that Europe is reminding us that the public sector actually can perform amazing feats. And I do think it's worth noting that the fact that RAND could orchestrate this milestone just in time for this event is impressive proof of RAND's secret power over just about everything. The truth is, it's been a news-packed few weeks for space in ways that remind us that at the frontier, we need to be ready for both triumph and tragedy. First came the launch failure of an unmanned orbital sciences rocket and cargo spacecraft bound for the International Space Station. Days later came the fatal crash of Virgin Galactic Spaceship Two during a flight test. And of course, on the culture front, we have the release of the new blockbuster movie Interstellar. What all this news underscores, at least in my mind, is that space is increasingly central to life as we know it on Earth. From banking systems to GPS to air traffic control to security, as Michael said, almost every area of modern life is dependent on activity in space and on human ingenuity and wisdom in creating and governing what we do there. So how should we think about all this? What are the stakes in space today, and how do we get it right? What challenges might derail space's potential? And how do we manage the risks and forge the global cooperation needed to realize space's potential in the era now unfolding? Well, we couldn't have a better panel to help tease out important angles of vision on all of these questions. Right next to me as we go down the line here, Simonetta de Pippo is director of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs. And I am reliably told that that means that if aliens invade or come to Earth and say, take me to your leader, Simonetta is the one that they will actually go to. So she's maybe the highest ranking official we could possibly have. She's also president and co-founder of an international association called Women in Aerospace Europe. In 2006, she was knighted by the president of the Italian Republic. But in 2008, she got an even bigger honor, in my view. The International Astronomical Union named asteroid number 21887 Di Pippo in recognition of her contributions to space exploration. She's also one of the minds, as we'll get into, behind the extraordinary landing on the comet yesterday. So welcome to you, Simonetta. George Whitesides is the CEO of Virgin Galactic and a former NASA chief of staff. He also served as the executive director of the National Space Society and was chairman as well of the Reusable Launch Vehicle Working Group of ComStack, the advisory committee for the FAA's Commercial Space Transportation Division. Welcome to you, George. And last but obviously not least is Cady Coleman, who is a NASA astronaut. She's a veteran of 2 space shuttle missions, and she served 159 days aboard the International Space Station. In fact, the woman you just saw in the movie playing the flute upside down was Cady. She actually performed twice while she was orbiting in space, once for NPR, and the other time via video for a duet with Ian Anderson during a live Jethro Tull show in Russia. She also, it keeps getting better with everyone, she also gave Sandra Bullock advice for her role in the movie Gravity. So welcome to you, Kate. Now, there's obviously lots of ground to cover, many angles of vision on these questions, so we're going to leave plenty of time for Q&A from this informed, if not inebriated, audience. Let's start, Simonetta, I want to start with the latest incredible news. You were involved really from the beginning, I think, with the Philae, is that?
Philae,
with
yes.
the Philae lander. What should people understand about this comet landing that they wouldn't know just from reading the news in the last day or so?
Yeah, it has been really an interesting mission because the Rosetta mission in itself was conceived probably 30 years ago. And, has been really a long mission to be developed. And the Philae lander has been a collaboration between 3 main space agencies in Europe, so the Italian, the German, and the French ones. And because the lander has been provided by these 3 space agencies as a contribution to the European Space Agency Rosetta mission. And it was quite interesting to notice that the comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko was not the original target. The original target was a comet called Virtanen. And the reason why we had to change comet was because the mission was originally supposed to be launched at the end of 2002, but then for a technical issue with the launcher, the Ariane 5 launcher, the launch was postponed, the launch window was gone, and you cannot ask celestial mechanics to wait for you. So after a certain technical, improvements, it was decided to launch the Rosetta mission in February 2004, and then the new comet was selected. But this was smaller and less known. And so we thought it was more or less, a big potato. This was the idea. But then
that means you knew 10 years ahead. You had to. It's like throwing a lead pass in football in the United States. Like you had to.
yeah. The idea was the idea was to know a little bit better the dimension and the shape of this nucleus of the comet. But then in reality, we discovered in August this year, when the orbiter of the Rosetta mission arrived closer to the comet, that in reality the shape was completely different. And in reality, it was two potatoes, but one in this direction and the other one in the other direction. It was completely, let's say, astonishing. Wonderful pictures, really wonderful, but I mean, the technical, all the engineers and the people in the control room, they started to be a little bit worried about, because, you know, it was, the mission was designed in a completely different environment, at least this was the idea. At the end, it landed. They are still working on some technical issues because it's not completely fixed. And so certain operations cannot be done until everything is fixed. But I believe it's the first time in history that something like that is happening, and it's really a big step ahead for humanity.
It's fascinating. Before I move on, I had one question. When I was in LA traffic on the way over here tonight, I was reading in the news that it said that the thing had at a full stop. I always tell my daughter not to do anything like this, but we were, you know, this is LA, so you could read a novel by the time you're here. What was, it said that it actually bounced like once or twice, and it's now leaning on kind of 2 out of 3 feet or something. Is that, how do you deal with that? How do you control that 300 million miles away? It's kind of astonishing.
Yeah, you know, we are very good in telemetry. No, I'm joking. We, in general, not only, you know, I mean, then now we are talking about the European Space Agency. By the way, this is also a mission in which NASA is contributing. And, you know, space is always, I mean, a way of cooperating in a way. So it's really cooperation by definition. And in this case was Europe leading, but very often it's NASA leading on another mission. In this case, what is important to notice is that, you know, when you start thinking about what you want to do for a science mission, for an exploration mission, you start 30 years before. And, you know, the scientists are always the same, and they are trying to follow all the mission along these 3 decades. And so in parallel to these long missions, I really see with a lot of interest this new revolution. So the fact that you can access space more often with smaller satellites in order to allow scientists, and not only scientists, to be in space with, I mean, with the, in a way, with more frequency and having the possibility to get more data quickly. Instead, these scientific missions, you know, but in any case, the solar system is big. And to go from one place to another with the present technology, you need a lot of time. And again, celestial mechanics is not always working in favor.
Fascinating. Now, Cady, let me go to you. As the only person on our panel who's been in space, I have 2 questions. What is being in space really like? And what's George Clooney really like? Did you get to talk to him as part of the gravity thing, or just Sandra Bullock?
You know, well, the guys on my crew, I was up there with 5 guys, and they said, you know, it's just not fair. Like, we have only you, and you have Sandra Bullock, you know? My brother met her brother-in-law, and that's how it wasn't any NASA thing or even a Sony thing. It was a coincidence kind of thing. But I didn't get to meet George, but I do tell people, I mean, in the movie Gravity, which I personally really loved, there's a lot of laws of physics that are violated. I mean, it's just a fact, okay?
Oh.
But that's not why you go. I mean, that's not why you come. I mean, I think that people come to a theater, or they come to a talk, they read a book, they watch a movie because they want to be taken someplace that they can't go by themselves. And that movie really did that for me. I mean, to me, it showed people what it looked like, you know, to be up in space and look back at the planet, and also a little bit about what it felt like to have that view. And to me, the physics that were right about it was really a small part of it. But something that really did irritate me quite a bit was that I told people the biggest thing that was wrong with that movie is that if you were out in space and you were with George Clooney, you would not let him go.
So, but
even you.
But talk, Cady, about, you know, none of us have been in space. What's it like? What does it feel like? You were there 150 something days on the space. I mean, what is that?
I would have stayed another 6 months in a minute. And we actually had a little thing going on where it was a subject of actual conversation. And I said, you know, I would stay. And I said, well, you know, I will call home and talk to my husband, and we would make a family kind of decision. But, you know, you could think in the staying mode, right? because it's an amazing and fascinating place. It was like living on a different planet or being a colonist, and just the fact that moving is so different than it is down here without much gravity. The fact that, you know, people like me that are not all that coordinated, anyone who knows me knows that that's true, I can fly, you know, like Peter Pan, and it's delightful and delicious, and I miss it. And so to live in a place where all the rules are different, you know, all of us have our imaginations excited in different ways. One of my compatriots is a guy named Don Pettit, who's just a phenomenal mind at sort of inventing things and very mechanically oriented. And when you put a guy like that in that environment, he suddenly figures out all sorts of things that we can't figure out down here. And I'm somebody who figures out different things, you know, up there. And so when you change the environment, I think you change what people can do. And that's why it's such a fascinating place, and that's what exploration is all about.
Can you even give like a quick snapshot of like what a day is like? Is there like a routine? Do you?
We wake up in the morning. We all have little cabins. They're almost like the size of phone booths, and in fact, in the bathroom here in the green room is like, I don't know, 10 times the size of our cabins. It's like, wow, this is really big, and they have a shower. We were wistful for a shower, but you open up the door of your cabins. There's always lots of privacy. You have as much privacy as you would ever want, but you open up at the door of your cabin, and it's soundproof, which I think is really nice because you can have a conversation with your family or with your friends, or, you know, it's a way of having relationships with more people than the ones that are with you right there. But open up that door. We were a up late at night crew. Paolo, I flew with one of the folks that worked with Simonetta, Paolo Nespoli from Italy, and we were a late night crew. And so about, I don't know, 4 minutes before the first daily planning conference, we would get up in come out of our cabins, vie for the bathroom. You'd fly down the lab, kind of hook a right, go in, flip yourself upside down, go into the bathroom or brush your teeth, depending on which turn it was for which thing. And 4 minutes later, we'd be talking to the ground about our daily thing, because we had no cameras until after that first conference. So often we'd all just be in our jammies, you know. and so that's the way a day starts. And then it is off to the races. You're eating breakfast and reading all the procedures. There's a lot of following of directions. And I mean, there's just a lot to do. And a lot of things that go into every single successful and unsuccessful experiment. Somebody planned it on the ground. They have to write something you can understand. You have to read it and communicate enough that you do what they intended, but not so much that that it takes too long, because there's really not a lot of time. There's always a lot to do. You're doing, we work pretty much 12-hour days, I would say, at least. And it's always a struggle for all of us to work on the things that are kind of our own personal projects that just involve communicating with folks back here on the ground. And everybody takes different amounts of time for that.
Last quick question before I bring George in. Do you feel afraid, or do you get kind of just accustomed to this is where you are and we're okay, and or are there moments of fear? Do things happen?
I think I worry about making a mistake. I was capturing one of the supply ships. That's my present job, to be in charge of supply ships, but I was the second person to capture a free-flying supply ship that comes up. It's like the size of a school bus, and it's 16 tons, and you reach out with the controls of the robotic arm and grab it. And what I tell kids is that the way not to be nervous about that is to know that you did all the homework you could do, that you were really just as ready as you needed to do. So that kind of afraid, I would say yes. But you put your trust in a lot of people that all made being up there and living on the space station and telling these kinds of stories happen. I mean, there's people involved in the planning, there's people involved in the equipment and inspecting, and I mean, there's thousands of people that make that happen, and all of it, I would say, is hard. And so I feel there's a certain amount of trust that's involved, where I believe those people all do their jobs to the best of their ability. It's as safe as we can make it in a practical way, and it's not safe. And yet it's important, and I think the science experiments and the engineering experiments that we do up there can't be done, many of them down here, and so that's why we do it.
George, if I can bring you in, I know folks would be curious, and there may be limits on what you can talk about, but can you share any thoughts on the recent events and how folks should think about that?
Sure. I mean, thanks, Matt. We had a tragic day, recently, and it was a tough day for our company. There's a reason why test pilots, I think, are respected as some of the most brave members of our society, because what they're doing is they're putting themselves in harm's way to make vehicles better for the rest of us and safer for the rest of us. So we're focused on two things now. One is to take care of the folks, the families who are affected. We lost one test pilot, but also to focus on the future. We've got a new spaceship that's going to be ready in a few months, and so we're working to make sure that we get that one as safe as we can and keep going. You know, there are a few parts of our society now where people are putting themselves at risk. Every day, the way test pilots are, and so I'm proud to be able to work around those guys, and we're going to keep moving forward.
Let me take it to a kind of broader question. There's huge public sector involvement and private sector involvement now as we reach the next frontiers of what our involvement in space will be. What's the right way, in your view, to think about the role of each sector in pushing things forward? How do we think about that?
There's a transition going on in the world of space, but I actually think that it's not as significant as it may be perceived to be. And the perception is that there is a sort of a step change towards commercial space. I would phrase it much more as an evolution. From the dawn of NASA, a lot of the work that has been done by, in the space sector has been done by commercial companies, but through a particular contractual mechanism. And so I think the right answer is generally to encourage resources to go where innovation is greatest. There's so much exciting happening now in the world of space. There's risk, but there's great reward, and so I think being unafraid to sort of try new things is really important as we move forward.
Simonetta, and by the way, I should mention also, I also learned that Simonetta was once referred to on television as director of the universe. So I want you to continue to be impressed with the power. And that's a long story, but I think it's just funny to say it. How crowded is space? In just reading a little stuff, to be even a little bit less ignorant than I am on this, there's millions of objects in orbit, right? So how do we govern this? What's the agenda? How tough is it to get international cooperation? Would this have even been on like the top 20 things somewhere that Obama would have discussed with the Chinese premier this week, or not?
It's true that in the last decade, the number of launches has been increasing. Now, to the best of my knowledge, 62 countries have been launching objects in space. And by the way, at the United Nations, starting in 1961, we are keeping alive a register of all the objects launched into space. And this is a mechanism which allows member states to inform us about what they launch in space. And we cover 93% as per today of all the objects launched into space, so it's a huge database. What's going on right now is that, with this sort of a revolution of the development of CubeSats and small satellites, it's becoming more and more difficult for countries to send us information about the number of satellites and which kind of satellites have been launched in space. And on top of that,
why? Because there's so many little ones, or
yeah, because that they are not keeping under control all the processes, and so we are now studying ways and means of helping member states to do their job properly. But you're right. I mean, one of the main issues we have is really that the number of satellites, but also debris, is increasing and increasing, and it's really crowded out there. And so what we are doing at United Nations with the support of all member states is to try to develop a strategy for long-term sustainability of space activities. And this is a long process because it has been done through consensus. So just to improve the collaboration among all the member states for the same goal. So to keep space cleaner and to be able to develop space activities under, let's say, a certain umbrella which is the umbrella of the United Nations and which allows member states to be on the safe side. So it's really, you know, a long process on one side, but also quite interesting because it's bringing all together the perception that space is becoming more and more important, that more countries are launching satellites, more countries, mainly developing countries, are interested in using space for improving the day-by-day life of their citizens. And also, we are using space more and more for managing natural disasters or for improving telemedicine or whatever. So there are really a lot of activities that can be improved on Earth through space.
Do we need some kind of air traffic control or FAA? Does that exist? No.
Not yet. We are working also with ICAO.
With what?
ICAO, the organization which is dealing with aviation, I mean, in Montreal. We are working with them in order to develop a regulatory framework also for space. And then, as George knows well, there is also this issue of suborbital flights, which are partially aviation and partially space. So it's quite an interesting topic for the future, in the near future. And also, what we are trying to do right now is to discuss the new governance of overall, I mean, global space activities, because the more we go ahead, the more, mainly in terms of exploration of the solar system, human exploration of the solar system, you cannot think about having one single country going to the moon or going to Mars. It will be more and more a global endeavor.
All very interesting. So Cady, what's your view as someone who's been in space professionally as an astronaut of space tourism? Are we, I mean, 20, 30, or even as soon as a couple years from now, but then decades from now, presumably this will become a bigger feature of society? Is that good, bad? Does it need to be regulated? How do we think about that?
Well, I guess I don't really like the term space tourism because to me, I mean, I don't know, nobody really likes to be called a tourist, right? And the people that I know that have come to space that are not, you know, full-time professional astronauts, you know, they come, many of them have flown with the Russians. They come with a purpose, with things that they want to accomplish, whether it's what they actually do up on orbit or what they use that experience to do once they're back here on Earth in terms of education and other things. And you know, to me, it's just part of the spectrum. And I think that every single person that gets to feel what we do, you know, in terms of the movie that you saw, becomes part of the machine that moves forward. And it was interesting to me to watch the movie, to listen to Simonetta talk about how back in 2002 they were going to go for a different comet, and then they had a rocket problem. They had to switch rockets, and it's just a few sentences right now. But back at the time, you know, here's a bunch of scientists that have already planned for many years that they're going to do something, and now they have to change gears, and it seems like, oh, now that's going to be so long. And yet when we look at a movie like that, you realize that exploration has a really long timeline, and that's where it is good to be looking at the facts of what do we get from this and how long it takes, and look how long it's taken to do these things. I just think that there's a patience and a timeline that doesn't fit our political system, where, you know, we can't, it's hard to commit to, you know, going to Mars when it's just not going to be a 4-year kind of project. I was part of launching the Chandra X-ray Observatory, and we have our 15th anniversary next week. Chandra is one of the family of telescopes where they each look at a different part of the spectrum. Chandra looks at X-rays and excuse me, and most of the things that we know about black holes are probably triggered from things that Chandra observed. It was supposed to last for 5 years. And when we launched it back in 1999, there were scientists that had waited their entire careers, 25 years, to see those images. And they knew enough to know that if they would get this telescope up there, then they would be able to see those things, and there they were. But it's a long timeline, and it's a lot of vision that's hard for people to have. And so we all get that vision in different ways, and I think that every one of the people that participate, whether it's in your program, you know, as ESA scientists with the comet, as people who are excited about the landing, you know, as people who do what I do, we're all part of that.
I'm still shocked to hear that Washington's timeline may not be 30 or 40 years. That's George, let me on the kind of innovative side. You know, everyone's heard of Silicon Valley. They've heard of Silicon Beach, kind of near here, but there's kind of a Silicon Desert people are talking about out in Mojave, where you guys are. Can you talk a little bit about what the interesting stuff is that's going on there that folks may not be aware of?
Sure. Yeah. There's a company in Mojave called Scaled Composites, and Mojave, for those of you who don't know, is about an hour and a half north of Los Angeles, and it's just north of Edwards Air Force Base, and where a lot of the American test flights have been conducted over the last 50 years. And because of Scaled, which won something called the X Prize in 2004, there's been this sort of ecosystem of other commercial space companies that have popped up. So we're there, and we've set up a company called the Spaceship Company that will build spaceships once we've finalized our development program. Just down the road, there's another company called Stratolaunch, which is funded by Paul Allen, and it's building the biggest plane that has ever been built in human history. It's going to take a rocket up and drop it, and it'll drop something that will weigh around half a million pounds, which is a large object. And then there's sort of smaller firms that are doing different things, but it's an interesting era. When I graduated from college, I knew a guy who was very smart. He used to run the CIA, and he told me, don't go into, whatever you do, don't go into space because nothing interesting is happening in that sector. And I think, I get where he was coming from at that time, but what's been interesting is over the last 10 years, there's been this profusion of innovation in the space sector, not just commercial, but also governmental, I think, as well. Cady's working on some new areas inside NASA that's going to be doing that. And I think, and that's really exciting. People can do things for much less cost than they've been able to do in the past, at the same time that we're tackling these massive projects like the James Webb Space Telescope, which is going to be able to look back to, about, 200,000 years after the Big Bang or something like that. And just amazing projects, so it's an incredibly exciting time.
Can people come visit, by the way? Can you go to Mojave, Silicon Desert and just do tours of the companies or something? Is that?
No.
Yeah.
No. But,
it's like in a James Bond movie where you see the big fence around the compound.
Maybe someday.
Maybe one day. I think we've reached that time where we're going to take questions from this terrific audience. I believe we have microphones circulating. I see one there. Is there one on either side? So if you'll summon somebody who's got a microphone, and the lights are coming up so you can actually see each other, and we can see you. And if you wouldn't mind just telling us your name and your affiliation so we know who you are, and then ask a question. We're going to try and get a lot of questions in and answers so that a lot of folks have time to engage. We've got a question here.
On the panel's left.
Hi, I'm Dominic. I'm a consultant at the Global Philanthropy Group. I just wanted to ask each of you, when do you think a human being is going to step foot on Mars?
We need money. When we have money, 10 years we are there.
Is that
without
right?
Without money, it's a little bit more difficult. No, I'm not joking. It's a question of political willingness, and therefore, we need public money because clearly the technology that we have to develop are really disruptive sometimes and demanding, challenging, and therefore it cannot be done. That's my personal opinion.
But if we had the money, 10 years. 10 years from writing the check.
Yeah,
We've got people here tonight prepared to, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Any other thought? Is it 10 years? Is it 20? Is it?
I don't like to give a number, but I think it's important to realize that there's technology that needs to be acquired and it needs to be better. I mean, on the space station, the system that recirculates our air and regenerates the water, those things break more than once a month. The bathroom breaks more than once a month. And it's not because they were designed by people that weren't very good. It's because we don't understand that environment and we're learning things. And the fact that Simonetta's grapple hooks, not all three of them grabbed, and it's not situated where they exactly how they wanted to be situated. Well, I just as soon find that out with your lander than my own personal ship on Mars. And because we've got a lot of small but necessary lessons to learn, and they do take money.
Any thought on that, George, or should we?
The only thing I would say is that to me, I think the answer is probably 20 years from funding, but the more important question is how we go. Because if we, do we do another Apollo, or do we sort of go to stay? Which I think is an interesting question. And so I hope we don't do another, take this in the right way. Apollo is a large reason why I'm in space, so I have huge respect for the Apollo program. But I hope we don't do another Apollo program for Mars. And the reason I say that is because I think we should stay. We should continue to explore. And if we just do something where we sort of plus up the budget and sort of do this spurt of funding, that does have value in itself. But I think there's greater value in establishing a program that continues over time.
In the bar afterwards, by the way, Cady will tell us what happens when the bathroom breaks and who fixes it, et cetera. Sir.
I've got a question back here on your right.
Hi, Larry Press from California State University. Elon Musk has announced, I guess, came out and said this week or very recently that they're going to try to duplicate the old teledesic idea of putting a constellation of internet routers in space. Would you guys comment on that, on the feasibility of it, the likelihood of success?
Who wants to take that? Simonetta?
I think it's a UN thing.
Any?
Elon Musk is a UN thing? Okay. Barry, what do you think?
Any thoughts?
No, okay, jokes apart. I have to say that this is quite an interesting idea, and I'm sure that he will make it, as usual. And I have to say also, linked to the previous question, that it's a question of commitment. And it was mentioned that, I mean, the Apollo mission, the Apollo program, if you think about it, it was announced with this famous speech of JFK at Rice University in '62, and the first 2 men on the moon were 69, so 7 years. And also, if you look at the shuttle program, it was more or less the same. So now, it's really a question of what you want to do, and I'm sure that this new project is quite interesting, like the others. I see a lot of very good ideas popping up, and this is because, you know, some technologies are becoming more mature, and therefore are more distributed, and then you can have really challenging ideas in quite also innovative ideas.
Great. Do we have another question over here?
This is a question for Simonetta.
Yeah.
What do you see are the international policy obstacles to beginning to remove space debris?
It's not probably a political issue. It's also, if you want, comparable to the issue we have with potential threat from asteroids or asteroids impacting the Earth. And the space community is debating these two topics since ages now. But there is the real difficulty is to be able to convince the political policymakers and the decision makers that it's time to spend money to try to solve these two issues. And the fact that this is not happening is because there is always something more urgent to be solved in space, or something more urgent to be done. From my perspective, so with the head of the United Nations, we are working a lot in these two fields, mainly trying to, as I was mentioning before, trying to define a strategy for what we call the long-term sustainability. And for clearly, I mean, both issues, asteroid threat and debris, are two main issues in this field.
We have a question back over here.
Question in the back here.
My name is Brandon Barney. I'm with Digital Village Radio. My question is, who owns Mars if we land there?
Who owns Mars if we land there?
No one.
It's the director of the universe.
Everything is mine. No, I am just an asteroid, just an asteroid. I mean, which could also be dangerous at a certain point in time, so pay attention. No, jokes apart. No one. There are treaties which have been approved, decades ago, and everything is regulated by these treaties. And but on top of that, since we see that there are also activities dealing with asteroid mining or private missions to other bodies of the solar system, we are now discussing, as I was mentioning before, the new governance of space. And I hope that by 2017, 2018, a new scheme will be in place, or at least an updated scheme for managing all these kind of activities.
Question back over here.
Hi, my name is Brad Kohlenberg from Made in Space. We just launched the first 3D printer to the space station, so that's cool. Thank you. But the question is as serious as it is self-serving. Have you guys thought about the new capabilities of in-space manufacturing, both short-term and long-term? And if so, what are you most excited about?
I mean, even in just a sort of small practical sense, I looked at the display over at the dinner, and it's all these tools that I used every day. I mean, and I'm somebody that could lose the TV remote, twice in an evening without even blinking, right? And so losing things, I'm being funny about it, but losing things and having tools break is a serious problem up there, especially if they're ones that you need a lot. And so the fact that you could then, make them again, let alone the tool that you didn't know you needed before you launched. So it's really an untapped resource, and I don't think they've made anything yet, right?
Right, we start printing in about a week.
In about a week. It's very exciting. It's really pretty neat. We were talking about what we would make. I would make a spoon. It's the only thing you need to eat, and losing your spoon is a tragic thing, actually. Long-handled. You need long-handled to get in those packages of very ugly food. But yeah, a lot of people. But it's extremely useful, mostly because we really don't know what we'll need. And on Mars, we really don't know what we'll need.
Self-serving yet fascinating. This gentleman here.
My name is Brad Bryan. I'm an attorney and a member of the RAND ICJ board. The discussion has, I think, assumed that space exploration has admirable scientific objectives. To what extent might space exploration raise military risks, military competition, and ultimately military uses? And to what extent is the UN concerned about it and doing something about that?
Great question.
Good question. It was an initiative which ended, first step ended at the end of last year with the resolution adopted by the General Assembly on the transparency and competence and confidence building measures, which is a way of renaming, I would say, potential military activities in space. The Office for Outer Space Affairs is dealing with peaceful uses of outer space. And so we are cooperating with other UN entities, dealing more with disarmament and this kind of stuff, in particular with the Office for Disarmament Affairs. And this resolution last year asked for a joint resolution of two committees of the General Assembly in order to build a plan for having member states converging on a common strategy, I would say. It's quite an interesting process again, because as you probably know in the UN, everything is done by consensus. And in the General Assembly, you have 193 member states. And in the Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which is the committee I'm referring to, for the peaceful uses of outer space, we have 77 member states. So as you can imagine, reaching consensus is quite an interesting activity. But we usually do that every single meeting. And I believe that in the next coming 2 years, we will be able to have a final resolution having member states converging on that.
It's a great question that we could
in
probably do a whole session on. Are you?
You're in the center.
What's that?
Yes, my name is Gantati Supamongkon. I'm the 39th Foreign Minister of Thailand. And the first question about who owns Mars, I believe that years ago it was declared that outer space belongs to the mankind, so the principle of common heritage of mankind. So in that sense, the international community would own, but no single state would. My question is the threat to human health of cosmic radiation if we were to travel outer space. Is that a serious threat? Thank you.
I would say yes, it is, and it's one of, I'd say many threats. We're learning a lot about what happens to people up in space in the journeys to Mars. Would be, as George said, hopefully we'll be living there and need to understand what happens to people. We're looking at some things. I think for many years it's been a known thing that cataracts is something that happens to astronauts more often than in the general population. We've had indications lately that there's basically increased intracranial pressure that is manifested in changes in vision in some astronauts. Not myself, actually, but it's a serious thing that we're trying to understand better. Plain old osteoporosis we lose bone 10 times faster than a woman who's 70 years old who has osteoporosis. So what she loses in a year, I lose in a month if I don't do exercise up there, and also trying different kinds of countermeasures. And so there's a lot to learn for being able to understand, how to live in space, and cosmic radiation is one of the things that we understand the least. And at the same time, those lessons come back down here to Earth in that we are looking at, for example, in the case of osteoporosis, we make really good subjects because the process happens so quickly. And so by testing blood and urine, collecting those samples, looking at the effects of exercise, the effects of diet, we're helping to understand, ways to mitigate osteoporosis down here on Earth. So these medical things that you're talking about are really serious, and we really don't understand, a lot about them. Certainly, for as long as I can think into the future, everyone that goes on a journey like this is taking a risk, and at the same time, they're part of an opportunity. And it occurred to me that, people who are going with Virgin Galactic, people who are going as space tourists, all that medical data is actually quite useful for the long term for everyone.
Just got time for a couple more, I think.
Hi, my name is
2 or 3
Abdul
more.
Tariq. I'm a graduate student at the Party Ran Graduate School. And this is a question for all the panelists. So lately, SpaceX has been kind of the darling of the media. And so I wanted to get your guys' personal take on what you think that they've been able to accomplish. And then secondly, what are some issues that SpaceX isn't considering that perhaps Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, Stratolaunch is looking at addressing? So if all of you could just give your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Well, I have a huge amount of respect for what SpaceX is doing. We've got a lot of good friends over there. And I think, honestly, one of the most important things that they're working on is reusability, which I think is the crucial thing for the future of space, along with in-space manufacturing, I think. The reason why space is so expensive is that it's sort of akin to building a 747, flying it to Europe, and then throwing it away on the other end. That's functionally what we do with an expendable launch vehicle. We build an object that costs, order of magnitude $100 million, and then we only use it once. And not surprisingly, it's expensive when you carry that out. And so SpaceX, but also other companies, like Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin, and others, are working on the principle of reusability, which sounds like a basic thing. It's a fundamental principle in the aviation industry, but it's not one in space because space is harder. Obviously, the temperatures, the speeds, the stresses are more intense. And so I think if we can solve that technical challenge, then that will open up space. And actually, I think that makes a lot of other things possible, like exploration of Mars and other places.
Does that mean, just briefly, it requires big advances in materials science or all the things that would let you not toss it out after one?
Yeah,
use?
I mean, it's a multifaceted problem, and so it's materials, it's guidance, it's, what your basic architecture is. But at the end of the day, you need to make something come back safely when it's going very fast, and that's the fundamental challenge.
Got time for just one more. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative to not ask everybody to respond to that, just because I want to get one last question. And do we have a last question over here? Make it a good one, sir. This is the last question.
Hey, pressure's on.
No pressure.
Aaron Lowenstein, I'm an attorney. If you had to pick just one mission to see come to fruition in your lifetime, what would it be?
Go ahead, of course.
I would like to explore the ocean under the ice on Europa, one of the Jupiter's moon. This would be my preferred mission in the near future.
Say the beginning of that again.
Yeah, Europa is one of the Jupiter's moon, and it's ice, on the surface, and it is probably there will be an ocean under the ice. And so the best mission, in my opinion, would be to go there, to land on the surface of the ice, of the moon, and to go down, drilling the ice and exploring the ocean. And it will be the first ocean after Cristoforo Colombo discovered the United States from Italy. So,
George, what would your
In terms of science missions, I think that, besides Europa, the other big frontier is extrasolar planets around other suns and stars. And so JPL has a mission called the Terrestrial Planet Finder mission, which is essentially a series of observatories in orbit that could then actually resolve the surface of another planet around another star. And so you could see things like forests, the weather, and potentially even life. And that's very exciting.
Cady?
I'd say Any mission that's real to you. I mean, any mission that you're on, you know, whether you're actually climbing on a spaceship or not. I've been involved since I got back from the space station in trying to help make partnerships between, you know, operating together with, say, SpaceX or Orbital Sciences, and the Japanese. They bring our supply ships to the space station, and helping these companies do business with us, helping to pass on the things that we know. And at the same time, it's actually really nice for us and the government to see them making decisions, you know, more nimbly than we are often able to, seeing them just, take a different path, you know, without, you know, taking a long, long time to do that is actually inspirational to us and the government. And so right now that's been my mission, is to be part of, you know, the sort of new world of doing these things together, where they're, you know, saying you have this operational expertise, operational experience, we respect that, we want to have that. These are the things we're trying to do, let's do them together. And I think it's an exciting new world.
So on that note, what a fascinating conversation. Before I bring Michael Rich back up to the podium, please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists, Simonetta, George, and Cady. And with a terrific conversation and so much more we could explore, and I'm sure we will in the days and years ahead. Back to Michael Rich.
Matt, thank you, and Simonetta and George and Cady, thank you for that great launch. I've had the good fortune over the years to meet many of the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo astronauts and the industry leaders as well, and it's exciting to me to see another generation of visionary pioneers. Very exciting. As usual, the great feature of Politics Aside is the combination of our panelists and the audience interaction, and we'll have more of that tomorrow. For those of you joining us, registration will begin at RAND, 8 a.m. With breakfast, and first session at 9 a.m. So thanks again for participating, and thank you to Matt and this great panel. Thank you. Good night.